Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NET337 session, Simplifying Connectivity from Remote Sites. I'm Nishant Kumar, and I'm a senior product manager in the AWS networking team, and I look into the areas of network, remote site connectivity, and network monitoring products. I have also with me Mark, who will be coming and speaking later in the session today. All right, so some housekeeping items before we get started. So this is going to be an advanced level session, so we expect that people here are familiar with the networking concepts and networking services such as Amazon Virtual Private Cloud or VPC, AWS Site-to-Site VPN, Transit Gateway, Cloud WAN, and other related services. We will be covering a bunch of topics in the session today, so we won't be doing an end-to-end deep dive on one topic. But so please watch out for QR codes throughout the session, which you can refer later to if you want to get more details. And finally, we will be walking you through multiple tables, charts, and sample architectures. And whenever the build-out is ready, you can take a screenshot. All right, so agenda for today. So we are going to focus mainly on all the cool capabilities that we launched this year for site-to-site VPN and how it is helping customers simplify the connectivity from their remote sites to workloads or applications in AWS. So we'll start with a quick overview of the site-to-site VPN service, and then we'll get right into all the major capabilities that we are going to discuss today. So we'll start with Secrets Manager integration and how this feature essentially provides more enhanced security for your pre-shared keys or PSKs. Second, we'll be talking about IPv6 support and how you can now build end-to-end IPv6 VPN connections. We'll be talking about VPN Concentrator. It's a cool new feature for site-to-site VPN, which will help you connect a large number of remote sites to AWS directly, especially when the sites have low bandwidth requirements. Then we'll be talking about the 5 Gbps VPN tunnel. So today, as many of you might know, site-to-site VPN tunnels support up to 1.25 gig bandwidth, but with this enhancement, now you can do up to 5 gigs of throughput per VPN tunnel. Finally, we'll be talking about BGP logs and how it will further help simplify troubleshooting VPN connectivity issues. And finally, Mark here will be talking about how AWS and Eero are working together to further simplify remote site connectivity. And as we start the session, a quick trivia question for everyone. So when did we launch site-to-site VPN? Show of hands, who thinks it's 2007? All right, few hands here. What about 2009? OK, I see a lot more hands here. The right answer is 2009. So we launched site-to-site VPN alongside the launch of Virtual Private Cloud back in 2009. And over the past 16 years, we have launched 30+ new features on site-to-site VPN, thanks to all the feedback from all of you. All right, coming to the basics of site-to-site VPN. So AWS Site-to-Site VPN is a fully managed service, which allows you to connect your remote sites to the workloads in AWS. And the way it works is that on your on-prem site, you have your gateway devices, which connect to one of the gateways on AWS side. Now, that gateway could be a virtual private gateway, transit gateway, or a Cloud WAN core network. And whenever you establish a site-to-site VPN connection, we provision 2 tunnels, and both these tunnel endpoints live in different availability zones for high availability reasons. And since this is a managed service, you don't need to worry about any of the patching and tunnel maintenance work, and the service takes care of it. And due to this reason, we highly recommend that whenever customers are using site-to-site VPN connection, they use both tunnels so that in case of any traffic interruption on one tunnel, you can still use the other tunnel as a backup. Now, let's look at some of the common connectivity patterns in terms of how customers connect their sites using site-to-site VPN. So the most simple and straightforward is using Virtual Private Gateway, or VGW, to connect your remote sites to AWS. And this is specifically helpful if your deployment pattern is pretty simple. And what I mean by that is if you need to connect your sites only to a single VPC in AWS, Virtual Private Gateway is very simple and handy, and especially because your routing needs are anyways going to be simple. But when it comes to complex routing needs, and you need to connect multiple VPCs to your remote sites, that is when Transit Gateway and Cloud WAN come in handy. So besides being able to connect to multiple VPCs, the other advantage that you have when you are using Transit Gateway or Cloud WAN is that you can use complex protocols such as ECMP, equal cost multipath, to get around the limitation of 1.25 Gbps, and you can even do higher throughput. And we'll talk about this more when we cover the 5 Gbps tunnel. And finally, the third and most common pattern is using site-to-site VPN over AWS Direct Connect service. So a lot of customers use AWS Direct Connect for private connectivity, but then they use site-to-site VPN over that to ensure end-to-end traffic encryption. And while this is not mentioned here, the other common pattern that we see with Direct Connect is customers using Direct Connect as their primary connectivity source and using site-to-site VPN as a backup for that connection. So I know this was a 10,000 feet view, so here are some additional links which provides more details around what are some of the considerations that you should keep in mind when configuring site-to-site VPN with any of these gateway devices. And then we also have a link for the blogs, which does a complete end-to-end walkthrough of how you can do all of this configuration. Okay, so let's start with the first topic of the day, which is AWS Secrets Manager integration with site-to-site VPN. So now, PSK or pre-shared key is one of the most common and default method of how customers do the authentication when they are establishing IPsec tunnels between the AWS VPC and their customer gateway device on the on-prem or remote site. And this usual standard and default method to store your PSK credentials is using the site-to-site VPN service itself. So it's pretty basic. When you are creating a VPN connection, either you can specify your own PSK or the service itself can assign one for you. And then site-to-site VPN service stores these credentials. And when you run a get API call, you can access your PSKs. Now, with Secrets Manager integration, so Secrets Manager is another AWS managed service, which allows customers to essentially store and manage their secrets, such as database credential, API keys, and everything. And with Secrets Manager integration now, when you use this method for storing your PSKs, when you run your get API calls, you do not directly get the PSK credentials, but you are pointed towards a Secrets Manager resource name, or ARN, as we like to call in AWS. And then this helps you basically centralize all your secret management for your PSKs for all your VPNs in your network through Secrets Manager. And one of the added advantage of using Secrets Manager here is that it also integrates with AWS CloudTrail logs. So you can actually have a trail and audit of who and when have they accessed your PSKs. And the best part is that there is no additional cost for using this capability. So next time when you are creating a VPN connection and planning to use pre-shared key as your authentication method, I highly recommend to try out the Secrets Manager integration. Okay. All right, moving to the next topic then, IPv6 support on outer tunnel IPs. So as many of you may be familiar, whenever you create a site-to-site VPN connection, for each tunnel, you get two types of IP addresses. One is the outside IP address, and one is the inside IP address. Now, outside IP address is used to establish the connection, but it is the inside IP which you essentially use in your routing tables to send traffic to and fro from AWS to on-site or vice versa. So when we launched the service, both the inside and outside tunnel could support only IPv4 addresses. And back in 2018, we launched the capability where the inner tunnel IP address can either be an IPv4 or IPv6, but the outside tunnel still needed to have an IP4 address scheme. So this kind of helped bridge the gap where customers who wanted to deploy IPv6 connections. But one of the challenges that customers were running into is that they still needed to do IPv4 to v6 and then back v4 translation. So earlier this year, then we added the support where you can now have both IPv6 on your inner tunnel as well as your outer tunnel IP address. So what this basically where it helps is usually for customers in the regulated industries where they have mandates to move to IPv6 only network. And if in case you are migrating or in case you are connecting to other sites or a mix of sites which are both IPv4 and IPv6, this can still help you. Another advantage is lower cost. So what ends up happening is that if you use public IPv4 for your outer tunnel IP addresses, there is a cost associated with it. But if you are using IPv6, there is no additional cost for using this service. And one of the most common questions that I get is that is there a difference in terms of functionality of the site-to-site VPN service when you are using IPv4 or IPv6 address? And the answer is no. The service in terms of feature parity is exactly the same. And the link for the blog here essentially provides an end-to-end walkthrough of how you can use an IPv6 address on your outer tunnel IP. And it also has a CloudFormation template also that will make it easier for you to do the deployment. All right, moving on to the next topic. And I have to say, this is honestly my personal favorite. So VPN concentrator feature is specifically geared towards use cases that require customers to connect a large number of remote sites to access their applications or workload in AWS. And the key trend is that all of these sites have a bandwidth requirement, pretty low bandwidth requirement. So what I mean by that is we are talking 100 Mbps or under 100 Mbps of bandwidth. Now, when we launched the regular site-to-site VPN service, what we noticed is that a lot of customers who needed to connect these remote sites, they preferred the model of connecting these remote sites to their on-site data center, and then from their on-site data center to AWS using the site-to-site VPN service. And in those cases, the 1.25 Gbps VPN made a lot of sense. But over the years, for multiple reasons, what we realized and found is that customers wanted these sites to be connected directly to AWS, and our existing 1.25 Gbps VPN was not optimized for this. So with VPN concentrator, we are essentially solving this problem. And just to provide you some more details on how this works, is now when you want to connect large number of sites to your transit gateway to access the workload behind this transit gateway, what you need to do is first create a VPN concentrator. And what it does is it creates an attachment between your transit gateway and concentrator. And now this is the attachment that all your sites will be now using to communicate to all the workload behind this transit gateway. And now the second step here, after you create your VPN concentrator, is to provision your VPN connections that connect to this VPN concentrator. So one of the most obvious advantage that you can see here is, in my previous screen, we had, let me see if I can go back. So if you see in my previous screen, I had 4 sites that needed to connect to the transit gateway. And for each of my site, I needed to create another transit gateway attachment. But with VPN concentrator now, you don't need to create attachment per site. You can, in fact, connect up to 100 remote sites using the same single VPN concentrator. The key thing to keep in mind here, though, is that the individual bandwidth per site is capped around 100 Mbps. And the total bandwidth supported at VPN concentrator is 5 Gbps. So you have to make sure that as you are connecting more and more sites, you do not exceed the aggregate bandwidth limit. So for example, if you have a 50 Mbps requirement per site, you can easily go ahead and connect 100 sites to the same concentrator. And as I was mentioning, this is a more cost-efficient solution that is geared towards simplifying how you can connect large number of sites to AWS. And we have seen a lot of this request coming in from customers with distributed enterprises setups, so like the restaurants of the world who have a lot of franchisees, then even healthcare customers who work a lot with small clinics and hospitals who need to access their workload directly in AWS. Now let's look and compare the VPN connections that you provision through your VPN concentrator with the regular VPNs. So in terms of availability, if you remember at the start of the session, I mentioned that whenever you create a new site-to-site VPN connection, we provision 2 tunnels, and both tunnels are in separate availability zones to ensure high availability. And that remains true even with your VPN connections connected through the VPN concentrator. Now, in terms of bandwidth, as I was talking about, with concentrator, each site can do up to 100 Mbps bandwidth, but the total bandwidth is capped at 5 Gbps. So you need to make sure that you don't exceed the overall bandwidth as you keep adding more sites. And with your regular VPNs, you have the 1.25 Gbps tunnel and the 5 Gbps tunnel. And we will be shortly talking about the 5 Gbps tunnel after this. In terms of the gateways supported, right now VPN concentrator only works with your transit gateway. And remaining features like IPv6, tunnel maintenance, accelerated VPN, VPN locks, all of these features work both for your VPN connections through a concentrator or your regular existing VPNs. And finally, the ECMP protocol, or the equal cost multipath support, which allows you to bundle multiple VPN connections to get a higher throughput, that is not supported on concentrator today. Now, what I'm going to do over the next few slides is essentially talk to you about some of the main configuration steps that is involved with a VPN concentrator. Now, obviously, I will not be covering all the configuration steps here, and the blog link here does a good job of how you can do this setup. But before I start that, I wanted to share something which is a common question I get around VPN concentrator is that if I have multiple sites connecting through VPN concentrator, can the 2 sites talk to each other? And the answer is yes, they can talk to each other, and you can use both IPv6 and IPv4 there. So there are 2 key main steps required when you are creating a VPN, when you want to connect your sites through a VPN concentrator. So the first step is creating the VPN concentrator itself. And second step is creating your VPN connections through this VPN concentrator. So this is the first step here. So now when you log into your Amazon VPC console, under VPN, you will see a new option called Site-to-Site VPN concentrator. And as you can see, I already have 2 concentrators here, and I select the create new concentrator, create VPN concentrator option. And the key thing here to specify is the transit gateway that your concentrator will connect to. So what essentially ends up happening after this step when I click on Create VPN Concentrator is that it creates a transit gateway concentrator attachment between your transit gateway and VPN concentrator. And as a reminder, this is the same attachment now that will be used to communicate across all the sites that will be connecting to your concentrator. So it takes a few minutes when you configure this. I think it can take anywhere around 5 to 10 minutes usually for the concentrator to be in available state. And once your concentrator is in available state, as you can see here right now, there are no VPN connections here. And I'll go ahead and click on Create VPN Connection. So if you have configured VPN connections today, this page will look a lot familiar to you. And the reason is because there are only a couple of parameters that have changed. So one is under target gateway type. Now you will see the option of selecting VPN concentrator. So when you're connecting your VPN connections through the concentrator, go ahead and select the VPN concentrator, and then you specify the current VPN concentrator that we created. Next step is to specify your customer gateway devices. And again, this is the same method as we do today, and which is customer gateway essentially represents your gateway device at the on-site. So in this example, I have gone ahead and selected one of my existing customer gateway devices. Now, there is one important thing I forgot mentioning earlier is with VPN concentrator, only BGP is supported for routing. Static routing is not supported. And this is the reason why when you look at the screen, you see static as grayed out, and you will have to use BGP here. Now, I haven't shown the other parameters that you need to configure for this connection, and the main reason is because they remain exactly the same as what you do today with your regular VPN connections. And this blog here, again, provides additional details on how to do the end-to-end configuration. So next time, if you have requirements where you need to connect a lot of sites, large number of sites, I would say usually 25 plus sites is the good middle ground. where you need to connect these sites and have a low bandwidth requirement, that really the benefit of concentrator kicks in, not only in terms of less operational overhead, but also in terms of cost efficiency. Okay, moving to the next topic then, 5 Gbps tunnel. So this is interesting. So far, we were talking with VPN concentrator about connecting remote sites that have low bandwidth requirements. Now, 5 Gbps tunnel is actually the opposite end of the spectrum here, where we have customers who found the 1.25 Gbps VPN connection not sufficient given the nature of their workload. So what ends up happening today is that a lot of our customers, as I was talking earlier, use site-to-site VPN in conjunction with Direct Connect, right? So either as a backup or running site-to-site VPN connections over your Direct Connect. Now, some of you might be familiar here that Direct Connect provides higher throughput. Like we are talking 5 Gbps, 10 Gbps, even 10 plus Gbps throughput. So what ended up happening was that because your site-to-site VPN tunnels could only do 1.25 Gbps, so what customers had to rely on was using ECMP protocol. So what ECMP protocol helped you do was that whenever you enable it on your transit gateway, all the VPN connections that were attached to your transit gateway were kind of logically bounded together so that you can get a higher throughput and you could do more than your 1.25 Gbps per tunnel. So which works when you have less number of VPN connections or less number of direct connect. But eventually what ended up happening was that it started adding a lot of operational overhead and complexity for customers to maintain this. And one of the other observations that we had was that ECMP, while it works well, in most cases, depending on some highly latency sensitive workload or highly data intensive workload, you may not always get consistent bandwidth performance. So the 5 Gbps tunnel support essentially is aimed at solving this problem so that ideally you don't have to use or basically reduces the need for you to use protocols like ECMP to get higher bandwidth. Now, one of the things to be mindful about 5 Gbps tunnel here is that when you create a VPN connection, you have two options basically to select your bandwidth. The default or the standard option is still your regular 1.25 Gbps VPN connection. And if you are interested in using the 5 Gbps VPN connection or 5 Gbps tunnel, you go ahead and select the large option. So from a configuration perspective, everything again remains same. The only thing that has changed is the new addition of the tunnel bandwidth parameter. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that you cannot move your tunnel bandwidth for your existing connection. So what I mean by that is if you have provisioned a 1.25 Gbps VPN today, if you want to move to a 5 Gbps VPN, you need to first create a 5 Gbps VPN connection, migrate your existing connection to that, and then finally delete your old connection, old 1.25 Gbps VPN connection. And it is applicable both ways. So you can't move from your 5 Gbps to 1.25 Gbps VPN. Now, in terms of feature parity between your 1.25 Gbps based VPN connections and 5 Gbps VPN based connection, as you can see, it's pretty much same here. I think there are just two main differences. One is accelerated VPN is not supported with your 5 Gbps tunnel, but it is supported with your 1.25 Gbps tunnel. And the other thing is in terms of the gateway supported, it's only supported on Transit Gateway and Cloud WAN. It's not supported on Virtual Gateway. But other than that, as you can see, all the features are supported for both tunnels, including ECMP. Now, I know we talked about the ECMP protocol and like the ability where you can't move between 1.25 and 5 Gbps VPN connections. But what you can do, if needed, is do an ECMP between your 1.25 Gbps VPNs and 5 Gbps VPNs. So the way it would work is that imagine you have a transit gateway with ECMP enabled, and you have one VPN which is 1.25 Gbps, and you have another VPN which is 5 Gbps. So in that case, you can essentially logically bind them together to get a higher throughput. All right, so, and again, for any additional considerations, you can refer to the blog post here, which talks about how you can deploy the 5 Gbps VPN connections. So next time when you have higher throughput requirements, I hope that you no longer have to rely on ECMP to get that, and you can directly use the 5 Gbps tunnel. OK. Moving on then to the next topic, which is support for BGP logs. So just 2 weeks back, we added the capability where now you can publish your BGP logs for your VPN tunnels to AWS CloudWatch. And this is essentially aimed at providing you better and greater visibility into your VPN connections so that it helps with your troubleshooting your VPN connectivity issues. Now, before we launched BGP log support, like as of today, we did support what is called as tunnel activity logs. So the way where it was helpful is that if you were troubleshooting your connectivity issues, which was resulting from either an internet key exchange, dead peer detection, you could rely on tunnel activity logs for this. And I have a couple of examples of some of the messages which are helpful if you are specifically diagnosing authentication-related issues. But what ends up happening is that if none of these are the reasons behind the VPN connectivity issues, your next obvious choice is to look at BGP logs. And what ended up happening today was that customers needed to create a support ticket to AWS to get insights or get visibility into these logs. So now with our BGP log support, essentially, you can self-serve these logs and build your own automation around it as you see fit. Now, at a high level, there are 2 types of BGP logs or messages that you will see in your BGP logs. One is messages relating to your BGP session status, and the other is related to your routing updates. Now, when it comes to BGP status messages, it will provide you information around things like if there are any prefix limit violations, if you are hitting any limits, or like change in the status of your connections, like the session moving to idle, as in my first example. And with your routing updates, you can get the BGP attributes, so things like AS path, next hop IP addresses, MED values, weight of your prefixes. So I hope that with BGP logs now, it becomes much more easier and faster for you all to troubleshoot any VPN connectivity-related issues. All right, so let's do a quick recap before we move into the final topic of the day. So you must have realized, as I talked through all of the features today, there is 3 distinct themes in terms of how these capabilities and areas where this simplifies your connectivity, remote site connectivity. So first is around security and compliance. So we talked about how you can use AWS Secrets Manager integration to further enhance the security of your PSK credentials. Next, we talked about IPv6 support, and now how with the IPv6 support for outer tunnel IP addresses, you can truly build an end-to-end IPv6 connection. Then we just talked about the monitoring theme, which is essentially how you can now get BGP logs for your VPN tunnels to help you troubleshoot VPN connectivity issues faster. And finally, the third theme of the day has been simplifying the connectivity. One is using VPN concentrator. So as a reminder, VPN concentrator is geared towards customers who need to connect a large number of sites which have low bandwidth requirements to access their workloads in AWS. Now, 5 Gbps tunnel, on the other hand, is specifically geared towards customers who need higher bandwidth throughput. And this can provide you 5 Gbps throughput per tunnel. And now, finally, we would like to talk about how AWS and Eero is working together to further simplify this remote connectivity. And I would like to invite Mark for that.
Thank you. All right. Can everybody hear me? All right, sweet. Nishant, great job. Another round of applause for Nishant. He has a 2-week-old at home right now, and he showed up because he wanted to show everybody about everything that AWS has been building, concentrator, et cetera. So thank you for making it out and whatnot, Nishant. I'm Mark Siglock, and let's see. Let's go to the next slide. Did that go? And I'm here today to talk to you about Eero. As Nishant mentioned, we have now integrated AWS with Eero, officially marrying your WAN and AWS's cloud connectivity with the LAN and everything that you have at your remote sites, at your branch offices, et cetera. I'm going to go through both the specific integration that we've done with AWS. For those less familiar with Eero, I'm going to go through some of our hardware. And after the show, you can come and touch and feel the hardware as well. And I'll give out my email. So if you want to test hardware in your lab, see how this functionality works, you're welcome to do so, and we'll ship over equipment so that you can test it. It's available today and in production, everything that we're going to talk about during this session. So thank you for spending the time with us, and let's have some fun. All right, a quick introduction. I'm Mark Siglock. I've been at Eero 10 years. So before we had revenue, before we had our first product, and our mission from day one was to make technology in homes and businesses just work through fast, reliable, and secure connectivity. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, for it to just work, it needs to be easy to use. Whether it's provisioning it centrally from a managed IT and then someone getting that at a branch location, just being able to plug it in and it works, or setting it up for the first time yourself. It needs to be reliable. That reliability needs to mean if the WAN goes down, your LAN stays up. Devices roam, well, if there are radar strikes, we don't just move to busy channels. You have to be able to configure it for specific implementations as well. It needs to be, the connectivity needs to be really strong. The security is backed with Eero by Amazon. So the Amazon security team reviews and approves all of these products. And we provide firmware updates so that the latest and greatest is always available to you in the case that there's a security patch that's needed. And finally, it means cloud management. And so what that means is everything that we've built, because we came up in 2016, started with an API. And that API means all data is exportable into your systems. We also have a web front end so that you can see all of the data and analytics yourself. And finally, after that, we have a relentless team. A lot of you are in the audience today, but we have a relentless team that cares and goes and meets with customers, helps with installations, and goes and pushes the boundaries of what's possible. And so today you'll get my personal email. I'm literally doing 2 or 3 troubleshooting calls a day so that I stay close to our customers and understand what's going on. Every single person from the team is expected, whether you're an engineer, a solutions architect, a product manager, a marketing person, they're expected to troubleshoot, they're expected to go to customer sites, and they're expected to understand and listen and learn your problems. And so everybody here will show up for you day in and day out. All right. So if there's one thing you take away from today, it's that Eero has the most reliable networks at scale. We have tens of millions of Eero devices deployed across 28 countries. We are the #1 mesh system in the US. How many people here run Eero? Raise your hands if you run Eero. Sweet. Thank you for being customers. We have the #1 mesh Wi-Fi system in the US. What does that mean? It means we manage the largest distributed fleet of devices, or one of the largest distributed fleets of devices in the world. It means we're troubleshooting and we see problems more often than others. We've kept things simple as well. We've kept Qualcomm commercial-grade chips throughout our products. And so when we patch a firmware issue in one, it applies to the entire fleet that you have. It also means in the 28 countries, it means if you have a site here, a site in Canada, a site in Australia, we will support it. And it's the same hardware across all of those different countries. We just apply a slightly different software configuration, and the hardware shows up, and you can manage it all the same from the same dashboard, the same API, and you're not managing a ton of different SKUs for your business. All right, next slide. We have a lot of advanced networking capabilities. So what you see if you have us at home, as many of you mentioned, is like, great, I set it up and it just works. But there's a lot more to it than just that. On the back end, we have automatic channel selection so that we can choose the right channel. We also have the ability to custom manage or select any channels that you want or see fit. I'm going to pull up. We have all of the setup that you see in the mobile app and whatnot. We also have setup and configuration from the admin panel or from APIs. And if you designate a specific Eero to be part of, say, an apartment complex or a larger network site, you can group them together and we'll change how the wireless performance works across those sites. On the setup front, we spend tons of hours reinventing setup. When we first launched the company, we did what we called the grandma test. Over the holiday break, right about now, every one of us had to take Eero devices home, and our grandmas or moms had to set up the devices. And the goal was for them to get all 3 up and running in under 10 minutes. My grandma did it, and she had 4 devices, but she got it in 20 minutes. We just launched another setup flow, both in the mobile app and the wireless configs, and we're seeing sub 7-minute setup times with 96% first-time setup success rates, whether it's wired or wireless, et cetera. And we're deployed. We have some Amazon Go locations. We actually have, if you stop by, we have Five Guys at the Venetian Hotel here in Las Vegas. It's one of the largest Five Guys in the world. And it runs all of, you'd be surprised how crazy the deployments from QSR is. There are 6 of these devices. There are a ton of wired access points. We have a Wi-Fi 7. I'll go into these shortly. It is wired to all of their printers. It has static IPs for specific services. It routes back to AWS for some of the stuff that they're running in the cloud because they have a pretty complicated setup. And it is wild how many businesses are running on Eero, no matter the sophistication of their deployment. We have over 100,000 businesses running on us today. We also do events. We recently did the World Surf League, which was really, really fun to do. Drew, who's one of our solutions architects in the audience, did the World Surf League, and we ran, I think it was 8 separate networks across the beach and across the food areas and whatnot, and we were able to provide coverage to I think it was something like 40,000 people who were in and out of the area over a 5-day period. All right. Now let's get to the hardware. What do we have for hardware? So if you're setting up a remote branch or a site, we have a PoE gateway. This device has 2 10-gig Ethernet ports, 8 2.5-gig Ethernet ports, 100-watt power budget. It can power a bunch of these, the Wi-Fi 7 PoE APs. These support 3.9 gigs wirelessly. They're mountable, they're PoE, they're flexible for any type of setup as well. And then the mount's compatible with the dual band PoE product that we have as well. We also have an outdoor device. What we saw when we worked with so many multi-site retailers and businesses was we couldn't just leave Wi-Fi inside it. You had to take it outside too. And so we have this device, it's IP66 rated, so you can effectively do anything to it except for dunk it in a bucket of water. Wi-Fi is not very good in a bucket of water anyway. And this is probably my favorite product that we built just because of the stress testing and shock testing that we had to do with it. In addition to just say, oh, raise the heat, go cool, we actually had to do that very rapidly to make sure that the plastics or anything wouldn't break. We had to do a bunch of drop testing from higher heights than you would a normal product. And it was really fun to build this. Lastly, on the reliability network, we just announced and are launching here very shortly the Eero Signal. This plugs in via USB-C. It can plug into a gateway, which supports multi-WAN. And this is a cellular backup device. It supports multiple carriers. So say you're in one area and the carrier that's best is carrier A, it'll choose carrier A. If you move to a different area and it's carrier B, it'll choose carrier B. And we do all the eSIM management for you. We use a new protocol called SGP32. which is pretty awesome, and it allows us to switch between carriers in a way that makes it seamless for you, and you don't even need to know. It's just going to choose the best signal for you wherever you place it in a specific property. The other thing that's really cool about this is because we manage all these large distributed networks, you don't have to place this with your modem. So usually a modem or an ONT is plugged in directly to this, and then you put your other cellular device with that. But that oftentimes is in a rack, and that rack doesn't necessarily have good signal to it because it's in a closet somewhere. This can go anywhere in the network, plug into any of the Eeros on your mesh, and then when the main modem goes down, this device will pick up the signal, take over as the gateway, and then propagate the signal throughout the mesh. And so we used a lot of the work that we had done on flexible deployments and wireless to make that product possible. And lastly, all of this works with the same connectivity stack that I talked a little to earlier. It all works with what we call internally true channel. And so what true channel is we select the right channels in the clear spectrum. It works with something we've patented called progressive DFS. And so if you're using DFS channels and a radar strike hits, instead of shrinking the channel, instead of moving off of DFS into something that's noisy, we actually shrink the channel width and keep you there so it's clean spectrum. And then we move off later if we see another radar strike. And there's so much more that we do there as well. We also do unified firmware updates across all of these devices. And the unified firmware updates make it so that when you're troubleshooting, you don't have to say, oh, well, this site has this firmware, this site has this firmware, this site has this firmware, which bug do I have in each one? And you're managing that yourself. The way we've been able to scale to tens of millions of Eeros is we've standardized that. Now, we have to earn the right to standardize that. And so what we do is we provide flexibility of when those deployments will be pushed out. We have to provide a lot of clarity into bugs. We have to provide a lot of testing time. We have to make sure that the quality bar of every incremental release is extremely high so that you can deploy that to customers quickly or to your own sites. As I mentioned a bit earlier, everything that we do, our hardware and the connectivity layer, it's all cloud-based and API first. We came up and we launched in 2016, and and so that was when the cloud was front and center, and we run everything on AWS, and all of the data that you can see in Insight is exportable into your system, not only via API in real time, but also via all the data systems. And I'll get into a little bit later the data integrations we do with AWS. But you could export every layer from the streaming data layer, which into S3 via S3 replication, from via Kinesis and streaming via Kinesis as well. You can sit on top of Kinesis CloudWatch, or if you have someone who just wants to come in and check stuff out real quick, you can do all of that in our web-based dashboard as well for each of your sites and across sites. We have both a network-specific level view, a network group view, so you can see multiple networks that are on the same site, or a fleet level view across your entire organization. So why did we even do this? Like, everybody's like, oh, I ran you in my home. Why did you do this? Honestly, it wasn't the top priority for us. Customers kept deploying us and buying our products because everything that they had looked like that picture on the right. It was really hard to manage. They were doing everything with static or manual configuration. The hardware was extremely expensive. It didn't scale to all their sites. They were managing BGP and other stuff all manually. And a lot of times the firmware was out of date. And so what we saw customers deploying us. We saw customers buying us on Eero.com or on Amazon.com. And we actually had about 5,000 to 10,000 businesses deploying our product before we invested in features for them. And then we were like, there's something here. And we've dedicated a giant team to go after this opportunity and really earn your business. And we've done, as I mentioned earlier, over 100,000 business deployments to different site types, et cetera. since we started that investment a few years ago. Let's see. Let's go a little bit into AWS and Eero and how we merge things together. So technically you can put any device as a gateway, but this is the gateway at the site. There's about 2 clicks, 1 click to link your AWS account to Eero, and a second click to set up your VPN. You can connect VPN via Transit Gateway or via Cloud WAN, and then you're pretty much done with what you do with Eero, which is sweet. And then you can manage everything else in AWS. And so you can land everything in a specific VPC. You can set up firewall rules. You can do a lot more in AWS. If you want to do stuff locally, Eero supports VLANs, so we support virtual LANs. We support access control lists, so we support ACLs that can run locally. We support specific DNS configurations. We even can do some DNS on-prem with you and set up different applications on-premise if you have things that you need of that nature. Or you could run it through AWS. And so no matter how large your sites scale, we can work with you to find the right solution of what do you want to do locally, where do you want to set those firewall rules, what do you want to run in your cloud, and make sure that it meets your needs, both from a cost perspective, a performance perspective, security perspective, and from just simplified overhead and operational management. I mentioned a little bit, we support a lot of the things that Nishant covered today. We support the everything from the IPv4 to IPv6 integrations and more. And so we can get you details if you're interested in deploying our products to your specific branches or locations. I can get you that information as well. On a specific site, we support up to, call it roughly 50 Eeros in a specific network, and then you have to scale by having separated logical networks. Today, that's growing rapidly because of the number of deployments we have. And we've seen a lot of deployments to restaurant chains, department stores, and I was actually just in Australia doing a boutique hotel. They ripped out some very old gear, about 15 years old. They put ours in and they said it just worked, and they didn't really believe it was going to when we first put it in, which was pretty sweet. I'm going to talk a little bit about more about what we do with site-to-site VPN, security, and analytics here. On the site-to-site VPN, the only thing I didn't mention is we have advanced routing with BGP. So we support that today, and static routing options. We have multi-region deployment support as well. We also, on the security side, you get access to everything from DDoS protection to TLS certs, et cetera, based on our implementation with AWS. And then on the analytics side, we've integrated everything that we have with AWS. And so I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but you can get all of your data that's Eero replicated in your own S3 instance. You can set alerts via CloudWatch sitting on top of Kinesis data streams. Or if you want something simpler, you can set up all those alerts in Insight and in our tools itself. Let's see. And this is where's the next slide? There we go. All right, here are a few screenshots of exactly what we're doing and how to do it. So here is the bulk configuration and the specific alerts you can set for your APs, for your overall network, et cetera. Again, all of this exists today. If you go and get access to our hardware after this show today, we will provision you and you can set all of this up yourself. You can set up your entire organization or sub-organizations. I think some of the cool things that we do, we have over 100 internet service providers across the globe that we partner with today. Actually, 60% of our business is deployed through large ISPs. And so You can go and set up your org. You can set up sub-orgs. We scale multi-tenancy to call N orgs. So if we sold to a MSP that was managing one region, say you're across, I don't know, 5 continents, and you have 5 MSPs across those continents, you could provide the MSP, being managed service provider, access to the networks they need, and then you could also manage it centrally yourself with your own configurations. And so you can provide people the access they need while still having a centralized view. We support SSO and all the role-based access controls and everything that you need in just a general enterprise SaaS tool. We talked a little bit about dual WAN and multi-WAN, and so you can connect multiple WAN sources up. So if you have one circuit and another to the same site, you can pull those in. It can be connected to the same gateway. It could also be connected to multiple gateways that you have throughout your site for resiliency and reliability. And you can just configure it directly in the interface, or you could configure it via API across all of your different sites. And here's a little snippet of the Site-to-Site VPN implementation that we worked on with Nishant, and how simple it is to really connect to AWS. There's really not much to it. Thank you. My email, I guess it didn't make the final slide here. My email is mark, M-A-R-K, @eero.com. Email me if you want hardware, if you want to test, if you want to try out the products, if you want to go and have us do a site visit and figure out what your topology should look like, if you want to replace old networking gear at a different site, et cetera. I'm here today to tell you about Eero, to make sure that you know we have a team that is relentlessly working to improve your internet experience at your sites. And to go and help you improve connectivity for all your employees, for all of your customers across the globe. Thank you very much for your time. I'm Mark. Nice to meet you.